Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Latex Free World Foundation podcast. We are on episode 2. My name is Pauline Campos. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and pretty much everywhere else as Chronically Spicy. And I'm also on YouTube too. Did I say that? Anyway, today we are interviewing Laurita Tellado. She is the founder of the Laurita Spina Bifida project. And the reason that I invited Laurita as a guest, and I'm honored that she joined, is because there's a really big connection between latex allergy and having been born with spina bifida. I've known Laurita for years now. We met in our old days of blogging. But before you introduce yourself officially to the audience, I would just like to ask that anybody watching, we're a brand new YouTube channel here, brand new podcast, brand new foundation. We'd love your support. So if you could please like the channel, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, help the algorithm, check all the buttons down there, and that way you can stay up to date when we have new episodes go online. Laurita, why don't you take it away and tell us a little about yourself and about your experience as a spina bifida advocate, and then we can get a little bit into the crossover into latex allergy.
Hola, Pauline. First off, it's amazing to see you in real time, talking to each other face to face like this after, I don't know how many years it's been, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been.
So I hope you and your daughter are doing great. So I'm, very excited to be a part of this. And I've been, like you mentioned, I've been almost lifelong activist for the spina bifida community. I started around maybe age 10 and started the nonprofit back in 2014. So that's when the Laurita Spina Bifida project officially launched. And we started, fundraising, and it was a very grassroots efforts. So as you mentioned, having been born with spina bifida, I do have a very personal connection to latex allergy. A lot of people, I won't say every person, I don't know this exact numbers, but a lot of people born with spina bifida do develop a latex allergy and live with a latex allergy. So it is very much due to the overexposure from basically day one of being born to medical procedures, surgical procedures, and just being constantly in medical environments from birth. So that overexposure triggers an allergy down the road. So I was diagnosed pretty early on. I was diagnosed around age 4.5. So I was in preschool when, my parents started noticing that something was wrong. So I hope to get it more into that as we chat.
Yeah. Before we move on, can you tell us a little bit for anyone who's here and is not aware of what spina bifida is and what it means? Can you go into a little bit about that, and then we can get over into some more of the latex related crossover?
Of course. And yes, thank you for asking, because a lot of people may not be aware. So in layman's terms, spina bifida means open spine, and in Latin, and basically the opening in the spine, the spinal column, occurs when the spinal column doesn't close properly, and this happens within the first few weeks of the gestation period. So before a woman often even realizes that she's pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
the baby already has or doesn't have spina bifida. So if the
Okay.
spinal cord closes properly, no problem. But if it doesn't, uh, close properly, then it can lead to problems such as paralysis and incontinence, um, different neurological issues. So bladder, bowel, and then due to the repeated exposure, because spina bifida often involves a lot of surgery. So, closing of the spinal cord upon birth, so basically in day one, before a baby's even 24 hours old, they have their first surgery typically. And so it involves a lot of medical follow-up. So that repeated exposure to medical environments is what triggers that latex allergy in many of us.
Okay. And that's one of the things that we were talking about privately when we were discussing having you as a guest on the show. And one of the points that I think is super important that we bring up, because this doesn't, although people in the spina bifida community I know are disproportionately affected by latex allergy just because of the sheer number of extreme medical exposure that helps maybe not be the right word, but ends up progressing the allergy and creating the allergy and then progressing it. That right there is the crossover that can connect to the rest of the latex allergic community, because spina bifida notwithstanding, once someone is develops the latex allergy through constant exposure, because we're all exposed on a daily basis, we just don't think about the obvious things other than, say, like latex balloons and, to be perfectly honest, condoms. Like, those are the first two things people think of when they hear you're allergic to latex. And
Exactly.
like, there are so many things. I'm curious. Well, one of the things that I wanted to go back to, Frank, actually first, was a point that you and I discussed. I know that hospitals, if they know that if you have a latex allergy, and it's in your records, and maybe you're a frequent flyer, you go to the same facility for multiple doctors, multiple procedures, things tend to be safer for you because you're in a familiar environment, right? But that's not always the case, right? Sometimes, yeah, sometimes things still slip up, right? You were talking, can you tell me a little bit about what happened with, you said your mother actually helped keep you safe during one instance.
So, I want to backtrack a little bit just in terms, like,
Sure.
chronologically, because, I think it's critical to realize, like, I was born in the mid 80s. I just turned 36, not ashamed of saying how old I am. But in the early 90s, which is, when I started preschool, I was 4.5. My parents didn't have the information. I don't think the community really knew a lot about latex allergy when I started school. So it was, curiously enough, and this part is kind of haunting, because you think, what's one of the most important experiences in a child's life is like birthday parties. So we realized when I was in preschool, like, whenever someone in school had a birthday, and they brought, cake and balloons and everything, my mom would, like, invariably get a call from the nurse's office to come pick me up with an allergic reaction. And they had no clue what was going on. This isn't something that my doctors had been talking about yet with them, and it's not something that was very widely known at this point. So my parents didn't know what was going on. Eventually, they started to put two and two together, that I was having these reactions as a result of the balloons that were brought into the latex balloons that were brought into the classroom, or wherever, the birthday was taking place. And one of the odd little stories of me in this kind of diagnosis process was that, my mom would tell me the allergist didn't have an official test for latex. So what they did was, like, they took a latex glove, and these are like the common medical gloves you see in doctors' offices for, anybody who doesn't know. And I think they cut a little piece of it, I think sanitized it or something like that, and used it, in the vial or whatever. They used it to basically create an allergy test for me. And if you're not, anybody who's not familiar with allergy testing, you get a little bit. It's like a tiny little microdose of whatever it is that you might be allergic to see if that triggers some sort of skin reaction. So yeah, and that test turned out to be very, very positive. I was very allergic to latex. But it's definitely frustrating to think of, how early on and in this period of time, my parents and parents like them didn't know what was going on. And as I got older, you would read in bulletins and Spina Bifida Association newsletters. You would read more information about things that might contain latex. So, in the 90s, there was this whole fad with the little koosh balls, the ones with the little kind of spiky rubber balls.
Yes.
So, it was, and I had them in the house. So, we had to get rid of them and things like that. And then in later years, and I guess you kind of have to learn to adapt to a world that contains latex in it, because I didn't stop going to birthday parties or other celebrations. So as the bonus, the positive thing for me, I guess, was that eventually I stopped seeing rubber gloves with like the latex powder, that leaves that powder in the air, which was especially dangerous for me. So
Right.
apparently in my case, maybe if I don't get too close, or if I'm not like in contact with the latex, then it won't necessarily trigger that reaction. But I remember one of the most terrifying moments, and it sticks out in your memory because it was a traumatic memory. Um, everybody talks in the cliche of like being afraid of going to the dentist. But for me, it took on a different meaning. Now, I've seen neurosurgeons, I've seen orthopedic surgeons, urologists, you name it. But I was terrified of dentists. And one of the big reasons was that one time when I was very little, I accompanied my mom, who was the patient. So mommy was the patient, and on one of her dentist appointments. So I was then sitting in the room, in the chair next to where she was. And within minutes, Pauline, I had an allergic reaction, presumably to the latex powder that was already in the air from other
Mm-hmm.
patients. So right then, my parents had to reconfigure and realize this is dangerous for her. If we're going to take her to the dentist, it's going to have to be the first appointment in the morning, when that latex powder isn't, when the room has been cleaned the night before and there's not this latex powder kind of floating in the air. But I was terrified, because
Yeah.
it's not just touching something, you're breathing that in. So that was
Mm-hmm.
definitely, I think, one of the big turning points, that something as simple as and routine as going to the dentist could trigger a deadly reaction, with anaphylaxis and everything. So that was definitely something that stood out in my mind. And to this day, I mean, things have definitely improved in medical settings. I'm sure you've seen it as well. But
Yeah.
it's still terrifying, to the point where I constantly feel that need to kind of um, give that disclaimer and disclose. And even just getting my blood drawn, for routine testing, it's like, that rubber band, is that latex? Is there latex in it? And i'm
Mm-hmm.
i'm i'm quite repetitive about it,
Yeah.
to the
You
point of
have to be.
annoying.
Yeah, you have to be. And that's one of the things. So we'll include a link to the description. I'm looking at the Spina Bifida Association.org website. And just for a quick recap for anyone who is new to latex allergy, um, latex allergy symptoms can include itching, skin redness, hives or rash, sneezing, runny nose, itchy, watery eyes, scratchy, hoarse throat, cough, wheezing, shortness of breath, and in severe cases, can lead to an anaphylactic shock. Now, one thing that I have learned, there's actually two things I wanted to point out, jumping off of what you just said, with the skin testing, is that Latex Free World Foundation does have a link. You can go onto the website and check it out, because now things have changed. Of course, people learn things, and the medical industry, and I think it's the Asthma and Allergy Association. They no longer skin testing is no longer recommended for latex patients, because every single exposure actually can progress or create the allergy, can progress the allergy in someone who doesn't have it, and can create the allergy in someone who doesn't have it. And that includes skin testing. So while there are still a lot of medical facilities in the United States that still recommend or push for skin testing, I personally, and again, we're not giving medical advice, speak to your doctor and do your own research. But from what I have learned personally, if every reaction can progress the allergy and potentially lead to increasing the severity of that allergy, even being exposed in a controlled environment can itself lead to very dire circumstances. So that's one of the things that we like to point out. Latex Free World Foundation is offering blood test kits for free to people who believe they might have latex allergy or suspect it. But I know that not everyone is going to have a doctor who's willing to accept a blood test. I myself had an experience with a major medical system here in Minnesota where the head of the allergy department was insisting on skin testing after this was more than 10 years after being diagnosed with this specific protein that shares ethylene dichloride shares proteins with latex. It's in everything from latex and natural rubber itself to corticosteroids to dyes and a bunch of other things. And this doctor, but again, latex allergy is progressive, right? And I used to only sneeze when I ate bananas. And eventually it got to the point about a year and a half ago where making banana chips for my daughter, my hands got so swollen that I couldn't even bend them. And this doctor, I had picture proof. I had my husband with me. And this doctor was like, no, we need to do a skin test, bring a banana into your next appointment, and also bring an avocado because I have reported reactions to those too. And I said, but why would we do that? Like I'm showing you all of these resources from reputable medical journals, peer-reviewed research stating that latex allergy patients should not be skin tested and blood testing is what's recommended. And he flat out told me that I wouldn't be accepted as a patient if I refused the skin testing. So I didn't go back. But again, that's something you can research, and I think we can add maybe a link to some information in the description box below for people to look into, because I see in my TikTok on Chronically Spicy, I see people all the time telling me that they're going to be getting tested for latex soon, and my first question is always, is it skin testing or is it blood testing? And while the research has progressed, not everyone is on the same page, right? And a lot of the time, people like you and me end up in doctors' offices kind of educating our doctors on how to keep us safe. Can you tell me a little bit about the experience? You said even though you've got latex allergy in your files and you've had a lifetime of medical procedures, you still have had instances where either you or a family member has had to advocate to keep you safe. Can you go a little bit into that?
Absolutely. And I just want to say I'm learning a lot just from hearing you speak about your experiences, because like I said, when I had that first, test basically confirming that I had a latex allergy, I just had, a doctor with a cut up glove, and that was like the big test. That was the test. It was very, very rudimentary and we didn't know much. But as time has gone on and I've continued to have experiences similar to that, or maybe react to things that I didn't realize were latex, I haven't had so far, that I know of, to my knowledge, experiences with like the food allergies that you mentioned, banana or other fruits that might be associated with latex allergy. But it's something that now I have to keep in mind. But I had, like you mentioned, every time I go into the hospital, which especially in early childhood, I had 12 surgeries up to the age of 5. So that's a lot of hospitalizations, and then urinary tract
Mm-hmm.
infection also due to spina bifida. So I had a lot of medical history built up, and it was always in the chart. It was always like in bold letters in my chart. There was always a sticker on my chart. There was always a sign on my hospital room door, in red,
Mm-hmm.
like latex allergy, like, ding, 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 latex allergy. And like it couldn't be any more obvious. I will tell you, I thought this wouldn't be a problem anymore as an adult, as there's so many more people coming forward with latex allergies, especially even people in the medical community, which of course they
Mm-hmm.
develop allergies mostly through repeated exposure. And I was alarmed in 2019, and I'm talking about here in a hospital here in Orlando, that I had been hospitalized. And thankfully, I had my mom staying with me, because I always say this, I'm always terrified of, what's going to happen to me if I'm not able to advocate for myself? What's going to happen when you're unconscious, when you're waking up from anesthesia? Somebody should ideally, you would have someone who can advocate and speak to doctors and nurses and medical professionals about your case and your history, in case anything urgent comes up. And I had nurses bring urinary catheters to my room so that I could use for self-catheterization, to urinate. And I'm so fortunate that my mom was with me, and she was like reading the fine print on the packaging, and it said latex on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just livid that nurses that were assigned to me, to my case,
Mm-hmm.
would just, blindly bring me catheters, especially when you're thinking about certain parts of the body that you especially don't want to have,
Mm-hmm.
um, an allergy flare up, an allergy reaction. But, I think of that and it just horrifies me that
Yeah,
something.
I'm glad your mom was there.
I'm super relieved she was there. And sometimes you do get the opposite experience, Pauline. Sometimes you're surprised. Like I go in with my little spiel and I'm ready to say, I'm allergic to latex. Are those gloves in that box? Are they latex? And I know already, even as a kid, I kind of recognize the kind of suspicious kind of yellow tint on the latex gloves, and I kind of knew what they looked like already. And now I'm always relieved when I see the blue box and nitrile gloves. And but I remember when I had my wisdom teeth out, I was already a young adult, so I was in my mid to late 20s when I had to have a wisdom tooth extraction. And so I had all four taken out at once. And when I was going in to meet with the oral surgeon, that was one of my first questions. I had asked if he had had patients with spina bifida before. I believe he had. And my other question was, can you make sure that this procedure is done in a latex free environment? Again, you're always paranoid about what's going to happen when you're unconscious, when you're having a procedure that requires any form of anesthesia, and that you're not going to be able to advocate for yourself. And his response was actually, I have a very severe allergy to latex. And my reaction genuinely was like, oh, that's great. It was great. Not like, oh my God, I'm glad you have an allergy, but it was more like, oh, good. I don't need to over explain myself to you. You know exactly
Yep.
where I'm coming from. But it was kind of hilarious in that moment, because, it was more like my reaction was like, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I've actually had interactions like that with people on TikTok where I'm like, I think I did a TikTok where I was like, if I popped on your FYP page, I am so sorry. Welcome to the party. But I'm so sorry you're here. And people really responded to that one because they were like, yeah, we get it. Like it's always exciting in a very weird way
Hmm.
to meet other people who share the same experience,
But it's
because one,
human
it's validating.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's human
it's
nature. You want to
yeah.
know that you're not the only one out here. You don't necessarily, maybe with few exceptions, I don't know. I can't I can't necessarily judge, but you don't wish that on someone. But at the same
Mm,
time, you're happy to connect with people who are sharing those experiences, who have
Mm-hmm.
walk, and that's the case, I think, with a lot of us in the Spina Bifida community, who have had the
Yep.
experience of sitting out birthday parties, or I remember in high school, I mean, kids are vicious. And I remember, as you mentioned condoms earlier as an example of something that everybody knows about as a latex product, because they're so widely known in our culture, especially modern
Yeah.
culture. And I remember, whenever I would disclose in class, like for example, if I was taking a science class, I had to disclose my latex allergy to my teachers in case we were doing any sort of experiment or lab that involved wearing latex gloves. Either I would be assigned another activity, or somewhere else to go that day, or I wouldn't have to attend class that day. Um, Due to the risk of an allergic reaction. And I remember, kids in high school, middle school or high school would be like, "Oh my God, you have an allergic reaction." Oh, and they would say things like your sex life is so messed up or whatever. I'm like, I'm 12 years old.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
It's like maybe
Um,
the first thing on my mind.
yeah. Maybe not quite yet. No. One thing that I found very interesting, though, and I'm not sure. This is okay. So I thought of this. I found a study. Um, it was, I think it was PubMed. I'll have to double check, but I found a study. Now, you know that, I don't know if you know that coconut is a potential latex cross, right?
I know
It
now,
shares
thanks.
proteins. Okay, it shares proteins, and you can either be allergic to coconut independently, which I am, or you can also be allergic through the shared proteins. And when you're allergic to multiple food, one or more foods that cross over from natural rubber latex, because they're in the same family from the rubber tree, or because of shared proteins, then that's known as latex fruit syndrome, right? Which I have. And I'm allergic to actually quite a few things on the latex cross potential list, from avocado to coconut to I've had issues with like the gum, like different like gums and stuff used as thickening agents, like in almond milk and that kind of thing. I can be in the same building as a poinsettia plant right now because they're in the same family as latex, but I can't. If I get too close, I start feeling my warning signs of a reaction. So like there's a bunch of things like that. But one thing that I find super interesting, and I find this interesting in an ironic kind of way, and I think we talked about this a little bit, and that is the fact that latex allergy is known to be a progressive allergy, right? It's known that while there are some who may be born with the allergy, for the most part, most of the research that I've done states that it's an allergy that builds with constant exposure and re-exposure, right?
Right.
Um, and aside from the obvious, especially with spina bifida, community members who are exposed to multiple upon multiple medical procedures in a relatively short amount of time. You've had more procedures in 36 years than I think most people would see in 3 lifetimes, probably. So that's a lot of, and a lot of that happened before you were aware of your latex allergy, right?
And a
So,
lot of that happened
um,
before I was able to fully advocate for myself as well. So, either my mom or my dad, somebody had to be in the room with me to speak for me.
right,
Which
right,
Yeah, which is
right. And so,
education.
one thing that, and now I kind of figured out going back for myself, my latex allergy. Very quickly, I'll share a quick story because I think this ties into a point I want to bring up with, especially with spina bifida, and related to latex allergy. Now, um, I had my daughter's 15 and a half. I had her in 2007, and I had horrible pregnancy. I was hospitalized 3 times for hyperemesis gravidarum, which is severe morning sickness, like Princess Kate. I ended up having to be admitted to the hospital for a full week, every other week for the first 6 weeks of her life for IV antibiotics because I developed severe mastitis. I had a reduction back when I was 24 and things didn't connect properly. So I was having milk buildup that in the fluid in the ducts that ended up causing this inflammation and this really, really, really severe infection, right? So I'm in the hospital literally every other week for the first 6 weeks of my daughter's life with IVs and presumably latex exposure everywhere, because at this point I haven't yet been diagnosed, right? But like before all of this, I was sensitive to latex in the sense that maybe if I wore like, you know, the jelly shoes that were popular in the 80s, like that they might make my feet feel kind of weird, but like I could be around balloons. I had a basically normal life.
Right.
After I got out of the hospital, when I stopped breastfeeding out of the advice of my doctor because of the continued problems, that's when everything went from to what the hell is going on, because I was reacting to everything. So now that brings me back to tying back to spina bifida and just the medical industry in general, knowing that latex is proven to be a progressive allergy that is most often caused by repeated exposure, especially with spina bifida. I can kind of understand me. I was just an average mom who had just given birth, and I had a severe case of a relatively common problem for women that breastfeed that I ended up in the hospital multiple times for. But so obviously, because nothing was in my charts at the time, procedures weren't being taken, weren't put in place to keep me safe, and keep me from being exposed to more latex. However, you were born with spina bifida.
Yes.
And I know from looking at the Spina Bifida Association and looking at your own website for the Laurita Spina Bifida Project, you know, that this is a problem that is obviously life-altering and can be very debilitating. But I also wonder if it could be avoided. Not spina bifida, of course, because that develops, you know, that's something that just, you know, develops and, you know, you're born with it or you're not. But if a baby is born with spina bifida, I seriously wonder why are hospitals waiting for latex-free alternatives for treatment options for patients with spina bifida, as opposed to automatically treating the patient as high risk for latex allergy and starting off with the latex-free options where they are available. Because I understand maybe not everything can be done that way, but like you mentioned, you're not allergic to, you haven't noticed allergic reactions to avocados or bananas, the other fruits and stuff, right? And I have a theory. I used to eat avocados and bananas like they were going out of style. So I think because I was constantly exposing myself to those, that's why my allergy progressed on that level for those specific things, right? Now, shellfish, for example, crab, shrimp, lobster, scallops, those are also shared protein. They also share proteins with latex. I don't eat those on a regular basis because they're expensive. For me, they're a special occasion. It's a holiday. It's a birthday. It's an anniversary. You might do crab legs or scallops or shrimp maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And because I'm aware now that they are a potential latex cross, I do pay attention to what I know are my allergy signs of an allergic reaction, right? And so far, so good. But I also know my thinking here is that because I'm limiting my seafood or shellfish consumption just due to the fact that I consider it a delicacy and a special occasion thing, but bananas are like, and avocado were like ubiquitous with like Latina life, and
Like everyday snack.
just yeah, everyday snack. I was eating keto, so I was going through avocados like they were like candy. Um, and so I think that granted, I don't have like a study saying that this is why, but I've spoken with other people who have kind of had the same experience, anecdotally, where the things that they're exposed to the most or were exposed to the most or ate the most are the things that they ended up becoming allergic to faster, as their allergy progressed. And so that's why, honestly, I wonder, why isn't it standard practice for people born with spina bifida to be treated as latex allergic from birth to begin with, as
Right.
opposed to
We
waiting
already with
for?
that flag with that we could develop that allergy pretty quickly with several several surgeries, several hospitalizations in. I think bravo on asking that question, which I feel like I don't think I've ever heard anybody or read about anybody asking that specific question. I think it's the question when it comes to spina bifida and latex allergy, because uh, we are diagnosed with spina bifida either in utero or at least immediately after birth. So they know
Mhm.
it's there. And so why not take that preventive measures to try to ensure that that child
Right.
maybe won't develop that allergy later on. I mean, of course, I mean, who knows? But you're
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's impossible. Like, from what I'm in a latex allergy awareness support group on Facebook, where I get a lot of there's a lot of great resources, a lot of patients who have had to do a lot of learning on our own, right? And it's one of the reasons I started, sharing, content creation for latex allergy awareness, just because I spent a lot of time thinking I was crazy, because all of these weird things were happening, and I couldn't connect. Who honestly thinks that they're allergic to an avocado? I'm Mexican. Why am I allergic to avocado? I can never have. Mexican shrimp cocktails were my favorite. I can't do those anymore because he can't make them without avocado. But I mean, like, the fact that we have to, as latex allergic patients, advocate for ourselves to the point of times driving our doctors up a wall, and possibly looking like a hypochondriac, or getting labeled as even potentially worse, because doctors think that we're over exaggerating or whatever. But the fact is, the research shows, and you can Google this. There are PubMed peer reviewed research papers, from reputable sources and organizations, stating that latex is a progressive allergy, and for anyone, spina bifida or not, repeated exposure can not only increase the severity of your allergy if you already have latex allergy, but it can also create the allergy in people who don't have it. And
And I
that's
want
across the board. That
and I
is
want
every
to
human being on this planet.
I was an adult before I realized, Pauline, that this also applies to healthcare professionals. So just doctors and
Mhm.
nurses and nursing techs, and it just didn't dawn on me that this same overexposure rule applies to people in the healthcare industry, and it could be literally anyone. So,
Mhm.
oral surgeon that took my wisdom teeth out, it didn't dawn on me that this was something that it's not specific just to me because I have spina bifida. It's not the disorder itself that caused it, rather the repeated exposure to medical procedures. Because it
Right.
always bugged me. I always was curious about it. Like, why spina bifida? That's such a random connection there to latex allergy. But it didn't dawn on me. And why then in that case, why are there still latex products in medical settings when the very staff could start out not having a latex allergy, but develop it over time. And I've met other people, I've met nurses and other people in the healthcare space that have also, shared with me that they have a latex allergy. I have been quite fortunate, at least, to be taken relatively seriously when it comes to this. I just think that I don't think people in general, and I'm not talking about medical gaslighting, which thanks to you and others that I've talked to that get certain diagnoses later in life, I've learned that is very much a thing. So this is apart from
Yes.
medical gaslighting. I'm not talking about this, but rather that I have been taken relatively seriously when it comes to my allergy because, I have no reason to lie about something like that.
Right.
But
And not to
yeah,
say that spina bifida is a bonus, and not to say that's a bad thing. It's part of who you are. It is a condition, and it is what it is. And you're a great advocate for the community. But the fact that there is such a high correlation between spina bifida and latex allergy, because of the fact that you have to have that there are so many medical procedures that are involved, for some more than others, but that's repeated exposure after repeated exposure. And things like I see people in my social media, especially on TikTok, all the time. Oh, well, I'm only allergic to things if I touch them. I'm not allergic to things if I eat them. Blah 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 blah. One person actually posted on Twitter that their doctor told them, and I'm not making this up, that their doctor told them that they were allergic to mango and another citrus fruit. I forget which one it is because citrus fruits are also share proteins with latex, from pineapple to mango to all of that, right? And banana. And this person was told that because they react physically to touch, right, that they couldn't like peel their bananas or like peel their mangoes, but like if a family member was home and could do it for them, then they could eat them. And I replied, and granted, everyone has a different level of where you're at on the latex allergy scale, right? Like celery shares proteins with latex. I can't do raw celery, but I don't react if I'm having celery that's cooked, right,
really.
in like a soup. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Like there's a whole list. We'll have your back. There's a whole list. And so like there are different things and different levels of, and everybody's at a different. Some people are airborne anaphylactic. Some people are housebound because they can't leave the house. Some people have to cross-reference every single thing and check with manufacturers to see if there was any latex contamination or contact just in the manufacturing process before they can even order a new item to bring into their home. Scotchgard and carpets contains latex. It gets everywhere. And
Right.
so like I see people who are like, well, I avoid balloons and I'm using latex free condoms or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but latex is everywhere. And the fact it just blows my mind. Like because I was in the same position as you, in the sense that I'm still learning
Mm.
what things could be potential latex crosses. The list
Learning from
grows.
conversation, Pauline. It blows my
Yeah.
mind. And I
Yeah.
do want to point out something earlier because you were talking about shellfish and you were talking about like you can't eat avocado, but you can eat like, shellfish because you don't eat it, as often. But curiously enough, my parents and I, the three of us, are all allergic to shellfish. Um, and I can eat other stuff. I've eaten avocado, I've eaten other stuff. But the three of us are allergic to latex. So to shellfish, not latex, to shellfish. And that's curious to me because up until you mentioned a potential connection between latex allergy and
Mm-hmm.
shellfish allergy, I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
um, those two were correlated. I've
Mm-hmm.
always assumed that my shellfish allergy stems from genetics because both of my parents
And
have
yeah, yeah, and that's entirely possible. Um, but like I do know that, like, for example, my daughter and I and granted, this is again not something that I have. I kind of piece this together myself, right? Um, in my own experience. Um, we lived in Tucson for 4 years. I found out I was severely allergic. My daughter and I were both severely allergic to the mesquite tree, which is everywhere in on the southern border, in like the southern border states. And it's a severe allergy for people who have it, because I've met a few people who actually had to relocate away from the southern border because of their allergy to the mesquite tree, because one tree 100 miles away can set off a reaction. And now here's the thing. Did you know that legumes are also on the latex cross list? So like
Legumes.
peas, legumes, L
Oh,
E G
legumes.
U
I
M
thought
E
you
S,
said legumes.
legumes. You like,
Legumes.
huh? Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Like peanuts, tree
Oh,
nuts, peas, legumes are also a potential latex cross. They don't affect everybody, like I said, right? But like some people do have developed that sensitivity. Um, and so like, but anyway, so I am doing research, and this is probably 3 weeks ago, so it was relatively recent here. I was like, I'm curious. So I looked to see what family the mesquite tree falls under. The mesquite tree is part of the legume family. The pods that are used for barbecue, and
right,
all the reasons that people use it, it's a
right,
mesquite, it's a legume cross. So in this might not be studied, this might not be whatever, but like in my mind, that could possibly be proven in the future as a latex cross because of the connection. Because if a legume is a cross, then why wouldn't the mesquite tree that's in the same family, right?
right.
um like and then like I'm gonna be posting a TikTok and a YouTube video probably in the next day or so, asking people about what shoes they wear. um are you limited in what shoes, what footwear you can wear due to latex allergy?
Well, I mean, that is a great question because a lot of like sneakers and well, different types of shoes contain rubber. I've never really, um, I've never really worn different shoes because of my latex allergy. Now, ironically, because I have spina bifida, my shoe options are already limited. So,
Right,
um,
and
so
that's, I thought
heels,
about that.
sexy heels or whatever, kitten heels, forget it. But but yeah, and I wrote even when I went to after you and I met at Blogger, I wrote a whole thing about just this article about my gripes with the fashion industry and how uninclusive it really is. But thankfully, when it comes to shoes, I haven't noticed any allergic reactions to what I'm wearing on my feet. But again, it's one of those things that you have to kind of think about if you are noticing symptoms, if you are noticing anything, any swelling or any redness,
Hmm.
on your skin.
Yep.
It's one of those things. One of the things growing up that my mom was always wary of is like face paints, and because you see them
Yes.
everywhere. You go to a fair, you go to like a party in the park, for children or something like that, and you have someone set up to do face painting. So we would always ask about that. Sometimes I would participate if we asked and if the person knew that it seemed to know that it wasn't. Sometimes allergies feel a lot like living with allergies feel a lot like Russian roulette because you can be exposed to it many, many times. You can expose yourself or take a risk, roll the dice many times and be fine, be totally fine. And the day comes and it's your turn. Um, so I could
Right.
eat lobster
And
every
yes.
day. I could eat lobster every day if I wanted to. I don't. And, maybe
Yeah.
someday that'll come that I am hit with a reaction. But
Yeah.
so again, I mean, even as we're talking, I realize how lucky I am that my that I didn't run into more dangerous situations than I have. But I do have a lengthy family history on both sides. of different like reactions and just in nature, just environmental. So, and of course, there's the shellfish allergy from both parents that I talked about. So, I mean, who knows? I may have had allergic reactions. I do recall as a kid several reactions where I had to go to the ER and we never knew exactly what triggered it. I don't know if they were latex related or not. But one of those full blown reactions where I had an asthma attack, broke into hives, even got, even threw up. I remember one of those reactions quite vividly. So to this day, I don't know what triggered it.
Yeah, like, so I'm looking again at the Spina Bifida Association.org website, and other signs and symptoms of latex allergy can include difficulty breathing caused by swelling of lips, tongue, or windpipe, severe drop in blood pressure, dizziness, loss of consciousness, confusion, slurred speech, rapid or weak pulse, blue hue of the skin, diarrhea, and nausea and vomiting. Now, one of my instant, like, I know I'm having a reaction. I actually get like skin reactions. My skin starts getting like really hard in certain areas, like welts forming, and my tongue goes dry, and I get like this panicky feeling, like a panic attack, which can in and of itself be a sign of an allergic reaction. And one thing that I learned in the last year or so, as I started doing more and more advocacy work on content, and sharing content creation, is that 2 or more body systems affected at once is considered anaphylaxis, is medically defined as anaphylaxis. So if you have diarrhea and like a racing heart, if you have mental confusion and you have welts, if you have, any 2 body systems or more affected at once is anaphylaxis. And I learned this when I went to the ER for, I had a reaction to a medication, and like my eyebrows got so swollen it honestly looked like I was starting to sprout horns, and I had the racing heart and my fingers were swollen. So I had multiple things going on at one time, and I was getting sick, and just everything was happening, panic attacks, the whole bit. I probably had 4 or 5 things going on at once, and so I go to the ER because I decide I'm going to use an EpiPen, and not even kidding you, the doctor asks me why I'm there if I can breathe. Because that the medical, one of my TikToks is describing the misunderstanding of anaphylaxis in the current stage. We've all kind of like, even I kind of accepted the Hollywood version and explanation of anaphylaxis, which is, your blood pressure drops so severely you pass out and your windpipe closes. That's actually anaphylactic shock. So if you get to the point that your blood pressure is dropping to the point that you're in the danger zone, you've hit anaphylactic shock. But like, doctors aren't going to take you seriously if you walk into the emergency room with like, a runny nose and diarrhea because you were by a balloon,
Right.
and so there are, I've spoken with my doctor, my allergists and stuff, and come up with kind of my own. And again, this is what, like, everybody kind of has to do this on them, talk to your doctor about what your signs are, what your rescue plan is when having reactions, and how to judge, and like when to know, okay, here's your cutoff point for when you need to go to the ER, right? And because it's different for everybody, and it's something that I think people need to be aware of, because like I had no idea that I was going through multiple anaphylactic reactions sometimes in a given day.
I too thought the same. I thought that anaphylaxis was. I previously thought anaphylaxis was just like, you stop breathing or you have trouble, difficulty breathing. Also should mention I had asthma in childhood too. So I mean, it's so when you have multiple things going on, you don't always know exactly it's environmental, if it's because of like something like, seasonal allergies, or if it's a reaction to something more, more sinister, like something that you're more allergic to than other things. So it's we
Mm-hmm.
always have like Florida here, every time like spring erupts is just like torture on
Mm-hmm.
our family, on our sinuses. So I mean, there's so many different conflicting variables that
Right.
can be on at any time. So like, what is it? What exactly is it? How do you pinpoint one thing? Because you don't, unless we're like in a clean room, and like in medical dramas, and we're being slowly introduced to certain variables, we're not going to know
Right.
100% what caused
Right.
it.
And it's going to take years, if not decades, to connect all the dots and be able to say, oh my goodness, I have a latex allergy.
Right.
And then it could take even years from that point to kind of like go back in your mind to figure out where it began. Now, I can kind of understand with the fact that, you were born in the era when latex allergy, I believe, was still kind of like becoming like an um, more of a trigger point for topic in the medical industry, because that's around the same time that doctors and and medical facilities were starting to try and move over to nitrile gloves, because so many medical and staff and first responders were becoming allergic to latex because of the repeated exposure with the gloves, right? Like,
Right.
I can always, we don't know what we don't know, right? And it's what you do with the knowledge when you're presented with it. Do you accept the fact that you need to learn more, or do you shut your patient down because they might happen to know more than you, and and tell them they're overreacting? But like, my big takeaway from tonight, I think, is wondering if there's any way we can work to connect with doctors and movers and shakers in the medical community who are latex allergy aware, and figuring out why is it that we are allowing all patients, and especially spina bifida, but all patients in general, to be exposed to latex containing medical items in catheters. The tips and IV bags contain latex. The obtrusion material used in root canals contains a latex cross. There's all of these different things
There's
that,
medical tape,
unless,
there's
huh?
medical tape, that they
Yeah.
use either for taping up an IV, or bandaging.
The
Um,
adhesive they put on the patches for skin testing for allergies, right? Like, like that's insane too. So why is it that instead of using the knowledge that we have now, um, and trying to limit the exposure, why is it that we can't um, work with the medical industry to reduce exposure from the get-go, as opposed to waiting for it to be the response, right? So
exactly.
um yeah, so I think we've probably been talking for about an hour now, so we should probably wrap things up. Where can people find you? I'd love to have you on again in the future, but where can people find you?
Well, I've just like I mean, this hour has gone by pretty quickly. I know we've covered a lot of ground, so I'm really grateful to you for having me. And honestly, I've learned more than I thought I would ever learn about latex allergy. And people can follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm at Laurita Tellado. So basically, just my name and last name, as you see on the screen, all together with just at Laurita Tellado. And you can also I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/Laurita Tellado official. And then the website for my nonprofit, the Laurita Spina Bifida Project, is www.lauritaspinaBifida.org. Laurita Spina Bifida Project.org. And we also have, for the nonprofit, we also have at the LSB Project on social media and the Laurita Spina Bifida Project on Facebook. We're particularly active on Facebook, and by we, I mean me. I'm our own social media manager. So I would love to be able to connect with other people and talk, more about what we're doing globally. So since we're doing work.
I am honored that you spent this time with me, and I hope to have you on again as a guest in the future. I make sure that we try to include links to Laurita's social media places you can find her in the description box below. Please follow. I know Laurita's on YouTube also. Please follow, subscribe, and help us build the communities and the power that we need behind creating the awareness to help other people who are in the same situations, and hopefully help to educate them and able to teach them to advocate for themselves in a way that can hopefully make their journey an easier one. We might not be able to prevent everything, but we can at least help people get their answers faster, our next episode for Latex Free World will be recorded on Friday with the founders Rochelle and Carmen. I'm so thrilled that we got to hang out for this time, and so grateful for your experience and your story, and proud to see all of the advocacy work that you do. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
If you haven't,
being a wonderful advocate for everybody with chronic illnesses, allergies, etc. So thank you so much.
Oh, of course. So for everybody watching, please, YouTube works when communities get behind their favorite creators. So I would be honored to have you support Laurita in her journey by following her, liking, subscribing, and checking out her channel, commenting on her videos. Please do the same for Latex Free World Foundation. And also like, comment, and subscribe to my own channel, Chronically Spicy. I am so grateful to be working with this foundation and helping spread awareness. And Laurita, thank you so much. It was an honor, and I hope we can have you on again soon.
Thank you so much, Pauline. It's been so much fun, and I'm really grateful to for you to share your platform.
Oh, of course. And I hope we can collaborate in the future, because I think that we can maybe use our we can go back to being movers and shakers and try and maybe partner in the future and see what we can do.
Yes, yeah. Let's dust off our superhero capes.
There you go. Right. Just make sure they're latex free. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Huh?
That's a good conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please, like I said, like, comment, subscribe, help us boost and create our audience. And I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you again on the next episode. We'll be recording on Friday with the founders, Carmen and Rochelle of Latex Free World Foundation. Honored to have you here. Thank you so much. And please have a great evening and stay safe.
Bye.